This program is about unsolved mysteries. Whenever possible, the actual family members and police officials have participated in recreating the events. What you are about to see is not a news broadcast.
In 1945, 5 Navy torpedo bombers took off from a Florida airfield and headed east over the Atlantic, only to disappear without a trace. Thus, the legend of the Bermuda Triangle was born. Today, an aviation researcher believes he has found one of the missing planes and solved the mystery of the lost patrol. When she was a young woman, Marge Ryder faced the excruciating decision to give up a child for adoption, not once, not twice, but 3 times. Perhaps someone watching tonight is one of the daughters she is searching for. Near San Francisco, a 60-year-old woman made a brave stand against drug dealers plaguing her neighborhood and was shot in her own home. Authorities need your help to find her unknown attackers. We'll also bring you the poignant story of 6 children torn apart by adoption 4 decades ago. One phone call may be the final step in bringing this family back together. Join me. You may be able to help solve a mystery. December 5th, 1945, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. 5 Navy Avenger torpedo bombers took off on a routine training flight. There were 14 men on board. The mission was known as Flight 19. 5 hours after they took off, the entire squadron would vanish without a trace. Their disappearance became the linchpin of a modern legend of the supernatural. It has been called the Triangle of Death, the Hoodoo Sea, or the Graveyard of the Atlantic. But to most of us, the area where the 5 planes disappeared is known as the Bermuda Triangle. This 400,000 square mile area in the eastern Atlantic extends from the south of Florida, northeast to Bermuda, and southeast to Puerto Rico. According to experts, in the last 75 years, over 100 ships and planes have apparently disappeared in this region. Though at least 1,000 lives have been lost, the Triangle's most famous victims were the 5 Avengers of Flight 19. For the last 45 years, the disappearance of Flight 19 has been used by many as proof that the Bermuda Triangle does exist. The 5 planes were said to have vanished inside some supernatural vortex and then whisked away to another world. But recently, an aviation investigator named John Meyer has come up with a more down-to-earth explanation. He is certain that he has found one of the missing aircraft just 30 miles off the Florida coast. If Meyer is correct, then one of the most intriguing unsolved mysteries of this century may finally be explained. For years, John Meyer has scrutinized Flight 19's flight plan, radio transmissions, and the weather on the day of the disappearance.
When I read the story and I read the transcripts of the radio conversations, it triggered a response in me, and I said, if this is true and this is true, then I think I can find one of the airplanes.
Last summer, using the latest in modern technology, Meyer mounted his 4th underwater expedition looking for one of the lost planes. In order to pinpoint its final resting place, Meyer has carefully reconstructed the last flight of the lost Avengers. It all began at the Naval Air Station in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It was the afternoon of December 5th, 1945. Lieutenant Charles Taylor was assigned to command Flight 19. Known as a cool, capable pilot, Taylor had logged over 2,500 hours as a naval aviator.
You are scheduled for a low-level navigation problem. You will fly 123 miles southeast, beginning your practice bombing.
Before takeoff, the crewmen of Flight 19 were briefed on the routine training exercise by a senior operations officer.
Visibility 12 miles, and the winds are southwest at 18 knots and gusty. Again, I remind you, it can change momentarily, so please be aware. Now, I respect your professionalism. Now, let's go over your...
Excuse me, Captain? Can I have a word with you in private, sir?
All right, I'll be back in 5 minutes. Relax.
Just before takeoff, Lieutenant Taylor made an unusual request.
Sir, if it's all the same to you, I'd just soon you replace me on the flight this afternoon. I'm just not feeling up to it.
Why? What's the matter?
I just don't feel right, sir. I'd rather not be in the air today.
Well, the rest of the instructors are off the base. You're the last one on the roster. I'm sorry, son. You gotta go up. Some people have speculated that he was a party animal and he was out drinking. I don't think that's fair to him. The fact was that for some reason he didn't feel 100%. Could have been an ear infection, could have been the flu, could have been any number of things. And as a pilot, it was his duty to say, I don't want to fly for whatever reason.
At 2:10 p.m., the 5 planes left the runway and headed east. Leaving Fort Lauderdale, the planes were to head 120 nautical miles southeast, make a practice bomb run, and then fly 73 miles northwest. They then would head 120 miles southwest back to Fort Lauderdale.
Flight 19 consisted of 4 student pilots who were qualified naval aviators. They each had more hours in the air than the FAA requires now for a commercial license. They had gone through all of their training but this one flight.
FT-28 to flight. I'm making my clearing turn.
The flight was not following Charles Taylor. He was the instructor pilot who was trailing behind the rest of the flight. He was grading their performance. He wasn't doing the navigating. The other pilots in the flight were doing their own navigation.
FT-28 to FT-36. Area is clear. Target is marked.
FT-28 to flight. Target is at
12 o'clock, 1 mile out. Let's see what you're made of. FT-36, roger. I'm commencing my run.
Radio traffic indicated that the men successfully completed the practice bomb run. But at approximately 3:10 p.m. on the second leg of the mission, Taylor's compass began to malfunction.
I don't know where we are. We must have got lost after that last turn.
Powers, what does your compass read?
Lieutenant, we're at 330 degrees.
Meyer believes the coordinates given by the students were accurate. For some reason, Taylor remained convinced that they were lost. At the Fort Lauderdale Air Station, the communications center monitoring the flight became concerned about Taylor's defective compasses.
Present time, I am over small islands, believed to be Florida Keys. My compass is out. I'm in the Keys, but I don't know how far down, and I don't know how to get to Fort Lauderdale.
I am over land, but it's broken. I'm gonna swing down and take another look.
Taylor had made a critical error. He thought that Flight 19 was in the Gulf of Mexico, flying over the Florida Keys. Meyer believes that in actuality, the flight was 300 miles northeast of Taylor's estimated location, flying over the Abaco Islands in the West Atlantic. From the air, the 2 island chains looked remarkably similar. Taylor ordered northeasterly, then due east headings. Had they been over the Keys, this route would have taken them safely home. Instead, it took them further out to sea.
The students, I am sure, because they had flown the area before, they're saying, you know, you're wrong. We're not in the Gulf of Mexico. We're in the Atlantic. But if the instructor pilot says do it, you do it.
By 5 p.m., the short winter day had darkened and the weather was deteriorating. Flight 19 was heading east, away from their base, and they were beginning to lose radio contact. The base did monitor one of the squadron's last pilot-to-pilot communications.
If we would just head west, we'd get home. Damn it, if we'd just head west, we'd get home.
Fuel was low, and time was running out. According to Meyer, Taylor finally listened to his student pilots and headed west towards the Florida coast.
So he flew due west for 49 minutes until the first airplane crashed.
We may have to ditch. Damn it, I'm going down. I got a ditch. Do you read? Do you read? Damn it, do you read?
In Meyer's reconstruction, the surviving 4 pilots then made a fatal error. Although they were only 7 minutes away from the Florida coast, they still had not spotted land. They began to believe that they must be flying over the Gulf of Mexico. For this reason, they again reversed their course and headed east. But instead of going towards Florida, their new course took them back out to sea. By 8 p.m., the other 4 planes had disappeared beneath the waves. The legend of Flight 19 had begun. For the next 5 days, the Navy mounted the largest air-sea search ever conducted up to that time. No trace of the planes or the 14 missing men was ever found. However, Meyer believes that some of the men of Flight 19 were alive, drifting at sea, slowly running out of food and water.
2 ships sighted flares within 5 hours of each other. And everybody in the investigation said, nah, those flares that were spotted were search aircraft. Well, you go back to the investigation and you find out when the search aircraft took off and where they went, and the search aircraft weren't where those flares were sighted by those steamers. 3 days later, another ship spots some blinking lights, distress lights on the water, and discounts them as being from another ship. I don't think so. I think those were people from Flight 19.
After carefully cross-checking all the available information on Flight 19, Meyer calculated the impact point of the first plane as here, just 30 miles off the Florida coast near Cape Canaveral. But finding a single Avenger in the ocean was an overwhelming task, until, ironically, a national tragedy made it possible. On January 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded moments after liftoff from Cape Canaveral. Some of the debris fell in the precise location where Meyer believes the first plane had ditched. Quite by accident, the underwater search for the Challenger wreckage may have uncovered what John Meyer had been looking for. Just 30 miles from Cape Canaveral, the salvage team located a plane wreck submerged in 400 feet of water. Believing the wreckage was that of a twin-engine DC-3, they ignored it. But to John Meyer, this discovery appeared to be the vindication of his theory. Last July, John Meyer was on board a submersible as it prepared to dive 400 feet to inspect the wreckage. He knew that 45 years might have obliterated many of the Avenger's identifying characteristics.
We knew we had a wreck, but we didn't know what type of airplane it was. And to say I was on the edge of my seat, along with my colleagues, would be an understatement.
As they first approached the location of the wreck, they could see nothing in the murky water. Then the wing of a plane became visible.
Oh my God, I can't believe I'm here.
But was it the right plane? One distinctive feature of the Avenger is its bomb bay, located under the fuselage. The submerged plane is upside down. Here, the bomb bay cavity is clearly visible.
I can't believe I'm sitting here in front of this airplane after all these years.
Another distinctive feature of the Avenger is its oval wheel well. Here, this well can be seen on the underside of the wing.
Oh my God. Okay. Look at that. Okay. Look at that.
Perhaps the Avenger's most unusual feature is the ball turret which protected the gunner behind the pilot. Even though the plane that Meyer found was upside down and partially buried in the sand, the unique crosshatch of the turret's window frame is clearly visible.
There's no question we've got an Avenger, folks. After all, at this point, 8 years of research and all the frustrations that we had, to actually be in a submarine and be right over top of this wreckage was just incredible.
It is obvious that Meyer has found an Avenger, but is it one of the Avengers of the lost Flight 19? Through the manipulation of the submersible's mechanical arm, Meyer removed the engine cowling. He was hoping that a serial number could be found that would confirm that this Avenger had been part of Flight 19. But after raising the cowling to the surface, Meyer was unable to find any serial numbers.
The only way to prove whether this is indeed Flight 19 aircraft is going to be to raise that sucker out of the water. I and my partners believe that we're correct, but it'll remain a mystery until we can raise the airplane.
If this plane can be identified as belonging to Flight 19, the legend of the Bermuda Triangle will have to be rewritten. It is not as romantic to say that the flight disappeared due to a tragic chain of simple mistakes, but if John Meyer is correct, this is precisely what happened. No matter what the explanation, the 14 men of Flight 19 deserve to be honored, not as victims of the supernatural, but as brave men who died in the service of their country. Next, the heartwarming reunion of a young woman and her mother marks the beginning of a new search for two long-lost sisters. Jackie Dragon grew up in a typical middle-class home near San Francisco, California. She knew she had been adopted, but had no idea who her birth parents were. Curiously, Jackie always had an unusual fascination with films and television shows about women in prison.
What's the matter? Somebody getting soft around here? Try something and you will find out.
I'm not sure, what it was that attracted me exactly, but I do know that there was some strange sense of security that I felt in watching the stories and, the women interacting in their lives, in their relationships in prison.
Like any young child, Jackie had a mischievous side. At the age of 12, she made an unexpected discovery.
I was scavenging around, sneaking around in my father's closet and looking through a box of papers, important documents of his. And what I found were legal papers, and as I read through them, I realized they were my adoption papers.
Jacqueline Stark.
It was a big thing. It was a turning point. It was something that I knew from that point on that someday I would find those people in that paper, and that I had to, that they were real. I searched, off and on for a number of years, probably starting around 1982. And I think it was 1986 when I got the information that I wasn't born in some hospital somewhere, but that I was born in prison, and that my mother had been incarcerated at the time of my birth.
I'm sorry, but it's time. Okay.
When I remembered that I had had such a fascination with movies with women in prison in them, I thought, boy, that's bizarre.
Yeah, girl. Say bye-bye, Mommy.
Jackie learned that she was born at the Dwight Reformatory for Women in Chicago, Illinois. Her mother, Marge Ryder, was serving a 1-year sentence for her part in an armed robbery. 10 months later, Marge made one of the most difficult decisions of her life. She put Jackie up for adoption.
I convinced myself that the best thing to do for Jackie was to give her a home that I assumed had 2 upstanding parents, that there was security in that home, that she could be guaranteed an education, all the things that I knew at that time in my life. There was no way I could possibly give her any of that. And I don't remember exactly when Jackie was taken, but I do remember that the day she left, after she had left, they came and told me that Jackie had gone to her new home in some other state, and it hurt. Same as it's hurting now. That's one memory I didn't lose. I didn't give her up in that sense. I knew nothing else to do. And that's the last memory, basically, that I have of Jackie.
Jackie's adoptive parents provided a stable home, but Jackie was always curious about her birth mother.
I wondered whether or not she'd been able to kind of clean it up, you know, or whether she'd gotten in more trouble, or whether or not she was safe or well. I don't think I ever considered not looking for her.
After more than 9 years of searching, Jackie finally learned of Marge's whereabouts. On July 26, 1990, she spoke with her mother for the first time in her life.
Hi, may I speak with Marge Ryder, please?
Speaking.
And what I realized when I found out that I had her phone number, or when I realized that I was very close to finding her, was that in a way, I was setting myself up to feel rejected all over again. Does the date February 16th, 1964 mean anything to you? Not for a second did she hesitate. She was happy that I called, and I felt so relieved and so lucky. Well, do you have time to talk right now?
I've got all the time in the world to talk now, yes.
One of the first things she said was, I never thought any of you girls would be calling me. And then she let me know that there were 2 other sisters. It was very exciting. I couldn't believe it. It's like, there's more? You're kidding. There's something more that I didn't know? Do you have time to talk right now?
Jackie and Marge talked for more than 2 hours. Marge told Jackie about her own troubled childhood, how she dropped out of high school, fell in with the wrong crowd, got pregnant at 17. Marge Ryder would be the first person to admit that she made a lot of mistakes in her early life. But Marge has managed to rise above her past. Today, she is happily married and lives in Winchester, Illinois. Inspired by Jackie's open-hearted love and understanding, Marge now wants to find the other daughters she gave away more than 25 years ago. Marge's first daughter, Laura May, was 18 months old when Marge went to prison. She was left in the care of Marge's grandmother. At the time, Marge was already 8 months pregnant with Jackie. She claims that once she was in prison, her grandmother attempted to get legal custody of Laura May.
Hello, Marge.
Hi.
Please sit down.
I hadn't been there too terribly long, and a lawyer came to see me.
Now, when I'm finished with my term, I want to take Laura May with me. I want to raise her myself.
Oh, I understand. And if you sign these, then it'll help us to all keep Laura May.
Now, what does this say?
Don't worry about this. This is just some legal jargon. I need to get you to sign right here, okay?
Right here?
That's it.
I think that he was probably on my grandmother's side trying to help her adopt the child away from me.
Don't you worry.
And
Everything's gonna be just fine.
the courts just stepped in because she was too old a woman to raise an infant child. And I think they lost her as well as I did.
Laura May was ultimately taken by the Cook County Welfare Department and became a ward of the state. Marge never saw Laura May again. After Jackie was born, Marge cared for her in the prison's nursery. But 10 months later, Marge gave in to outside pressures and put Jackie up for adoption. A few weeks later, Marge completed her sentence and was released. She never again got in trouble with the law. However, she did give birth to a third daughter, Dawn Marie, whom she also gave up for adoption.
I had often gone over in my mind, what if they come looking for me? And how do I explain to them that I gave them away? And I pretty much convinced myself, and I do believe it. I felt I was giving each child the very best that I could give them.
So how was your flight? It was real
On September 20th, 1990, Marge Ryder flew to California and met her daughter Jackie for the first time in more than 25 years.
You definitely got red curly hair.
Well, I wonder where I got that. I had many questions for her, about her hair, about everything. You know, it's like, who had red hair? That was something that I grew up with, red curly hair. Nobody ever had it but me, and it was a curse when I was a child. And
Look at the
she was great. I could ask anything I wanted, and she would tell me everything.
This is Laura May, and this is you, of course.
Wow.
You can definitely tell it's family.
She really looks the same. Look at all those knees.
I guess.
For Jackie, reunion with Marge marked the end of one search and the beginning of another.
You know, I like to think that somewhere, wherever they are, that they know that they're adopted and that they wonder where they came from.
They were mine. I did love them. I do love them. And it would be nice to make the family complete again.
Thanks to our viewers, Jackie Dragon and Marge Ryder's dream of reuniting their family finally came true when they were contacted by Laura May and Dawn Marie. Dawn Marie, whose adoptive name is Susan, owns her own business in Santa Barbara, California. Laura May, Marge's oldest daughter, is now married and lives in Mississippi. 3 months after our broadcast, Laura May arrived at her sister Jackie's home in Glendale, California. Marge and her youngest daughter, Tracy, had flown in from Illinois for this very special reunion.
So much on the phone.
This is Tracy.
Hi, this is your sister Tracy.
Meeting them was really nerve-wracking because it's like I wasn't quite sure what to expect and what they would expect of me.
Your child.
And then after I got here, it's just all seemed to flow. It was very natural.
Yes.
The last time I remember seeing Laura, she was in a high chair. And now here she is all grown up, and I'm still looking for this little girl. You know, and it's kind of hard. Hi, Susan. Oh, it's good to meet you.
A short time later, the circle was finally completed with the arrival of Marge's other daughter, Susan.
I grew up knowing that I was adopted, but I didn't know anything about who my real parents were. And it's nice to know, you know, who your family is and, you know, what your background is, you know, and learn more about them.
I think when I first started feeling really comfortable was when we went out and took some Polaroids, and it was a really neat feeling to have a picture right in front of me and see all of us standing together. It's a very once-in-a-lifetime kind of a thing to find a sister that you've never met.
Everybody smile.
Each one is totally individual. They're all strong, I've found out. And they've done good with their lives. I'm proud of all 4 of them.
When any family is torn apart, the scars can last a lifetime. The saga of the 6 Heck children of Iowa is reminiscent of a Dickens novel with an equally large cast of characters. Delbert Jr., Florence, Jim, Sharon Louise, Doris Jean, and little Tommy. These brothers and sisters were separated by adoption as children, but through force of will, 5 of them managed to reunite in adulthood. Today, they want to make sure that their life story has a happy ending. They need your help in order to make that dream come true. Council Bluffs, Iowa, the summer of 1944.
Come on, you guys. You're gonna be late for school. Come on, hurry up.
10-year-old Delbert Heck Jr. was a man of the house. His father was often away from home and did little to support the family.
It was very rough times. We didn't have any money for food or groceries. I mean, it wasn't hard times for us because that was all we knew. You don't never waste the water if you ain't had the well. So we thought we was doing fine. We had each other and we had Mother, and we just made the best we could of it.
What did you have for supper last night, Florence?
Puffed rice.
Puffed rice?
In August 1944, the family was visited by a social worker sent by the local welfare department.
I'd like to see the kitchen now.
The Hecks had to stand by silently as she scrutinized their home.
She opened the cabinets to see what was there, which there was nothing there, maybe a bag of dry puffed wheat or something. We didn't have dressers. We didn't have clothes hanging in the closet, you know. She seen the mattress on the living room floor where all 6 of us kids slept, and she just explained to Mother that she wasn't able to care for us properly, and they were going to take us where they could be.
3 months later, the state of Iowa took the Heck children away.
She told us she was taking us to a movie. Of course, you know, we had never been to a movie, so that was really something. So we went with her willingly. And Mother stood on the porch and cried. And I thought there was, you know, there was something that just wasn't right. When she crossed Broadway going north, I knew we weren't going to a movie.
The 6 children were scattered across the countryside like windblown seeds. 3 were immediately adopted. 3 languished in orphanages. 7-year-old Florence was one of them.
I cried for Mother a lot, but I cried a lot for the littler ones because, you know, I spent a lot of time. This was my life with the, and we had a dorm mother that lived in the end of our building, and they'd come get me, take me to the end of the dorm, and there was a little closet there.
You are going to sleep in here until you learn to stop crying.
And that's where I slept for a good long while when I first went to the orphanage.
Jim and Delbert were placed in a different orphanage in Davenport, Iowa. Delbert was farmed out briefly to foster parents.
I really think what they wanted was a farmhand. I don't think they wanted a child. I didn't have no contact with Jim, and he was the only one that I knew at that time. And when I didn't have him no more, I didn't have nothing to hold on to. So it didn't last but just a few weeks, and I was ready to go back to Davenport.
Delbert and Jimmy would remain in the orphanage until 1952, when the state sent the 2 boys and their sister Florence back to their natural mother.
Jimmy! Hey, Ma!
Maud Heck would never see her other 3 children again. Unbeknownst to the Heck family, 1-year-old Sharon Louise had been placed in the home of Wendell and Helena Jones. She had been renamed Dorisa. 5-year-old Doris Jean was sent to the home of Glenn and Gertrude West. Her new name was Sally.
She's 9.
It is assumed that 3-year-old Tommy Heck was also adopted. His new name, if he has one, is still unknown. In 1970, Dorisa and Sally were reunited. Both had been adopted through the same orphanage, which put them in contact with each other. The 2 then set out to find their missing family.
I had a lot of information on our biological family from all of the records that my parents had given me when I was 16. Sally didn't have a whole lot of information, but I had said if I knew where we lived, perhaps I could start there. And she said that she had that information because they had sent her her original birth certificate. And she was born at home, so she had her home address, which happened to be Council Bluffs, Iowa. And I got on the phone and I called information in Council Bluffs, Iowa, and started making phone calls.
It was like 1:30 in the afternoon, March 29th, when I talked to her. And at 11:30 that night, she called back. And she said, since I talked to you, I've talked to an aunt in Council Bluffs, 2 brothers, and a sister.
45 years after the Heck family had been torn apart, their day of reunion finally came.
Sally and I decided to drive to the reunion together, kind of like a team. We, by that time, of course, had known that the 3 oldest children had been raised together, and we kind of felt like outsiders, and we wanted to be together. We didn't really know what to do. It was like, do you walk up and hug them and tell them how glad you are to see them after 45 years? Or do you just stand back and shake hands, or what do we do? But the minute we walked in, it was, the bond was instant. And within 5 minutes, we were like, we'd grown up together.
The minute we saw each other, and you knew you were in the right place. You were home. There was no doubt but what these were, brothers and sisters.
The reunion was a celebration, but there was still one person missing.
Okay. Oh, there went the cake. It's important for me to find Tommy now, or for all of us, really.
This is the first party we've ever had together.
To me, there's still part of my life that's missing.
Finding Tommy is like if you've got a car and part of the pieces are not there, it's not going to run right. Well, he got a family. Part of the pieces are not there.
These are the last known pictures of Tommy Heck, taken when he was 4.5 years old by his adoptive parents who sent them to the orphanage. Today, Tommy would be 47. Tommy was adopted through Christian Homes Orphanage in Council Bluffs, Iowa, most likely by a Midwestern family. His most distinguishing physical characteristic is a double earlobe on his right ear.
We need to find Tommy to make the rest of our family complete, so that we can just close that family and say, here we are. You know, here we are, world. This is the Heck family. You know, look at us, Iowa. You know, you separated us, but we're back together now.
Next, the story of a brave woman who nearly lost her life in the fight to keep her neighborhood safe from drugs. Just past midnight on the first day of 1990, paramedics and police in East Palo Alto, California responded to an emergency call. A 60-year-old woman lay inside her home, shot in the stomach. Unknown gunmen had fired 35 rounds of ammunition into her house and car before they fled. The victim was Mrs. C.W. Roddy, a retired service representative for the phone company, who had lived in the area with her son Darnell for 23 years. The New Year's Eve attack was a culmination of a 3-year nightmare in which C.W. Roddy had been physically and verbally threatened by a group of young men in her neighborhood. Now she lay in her own home, bleeding from a bullet wound. Fortunately, Mrs. Roddy survived, and the East Palo Alto authorities continue to search for her assailants. Palo Alto, California, home of prestigious Stanford University, is one of several primarily white upper-middle-class communities surrounding the city of East Palo Alto, which stands in stark contrast. Formerly a respectable working-class community, it has in the last few years fallen victim to drug traffickers, whose customers often come from the affluent suburbs nearby.
The drug dealing on our street was very much like a drive-up bank window. They drive up, dope dealers will rush to the car in a total frenzy of competition with one another trying to get the sale. And it continued like that, day and night.
When C.W. Roddy finally understood what was happening in her neighborhood, she began to take action. The first confrontation came when teenage drug dealers parked their cars in front of the house she shared with her son.
Excuse me. Young man, do you have any business with me here?
Listen, lady, you just take care of little business. We'll be here in a few, okay? Don't wax your wheelchair.
If you don't have business with me, I'd really like you to move your car.
Lady, I'm not moving.
I will be taking your license number and giving it to the police.
C.W. reported the young traffickers often, but the understaffed local police simply were unable to cope with the enormous problem.
I've always felt that your home is your castle, and what you do in your home is your business. But when they bring their drugs out in front of my house, in the streets, that makes it my business. And I don't do that kind of business.
In February of 1988, Mrs. Roddy was physically threatened.
You know what's up, old bag? We gonna blow your damn house up, see what I'm saying?
And I said to him, are you gonna make sure that I'm in it? And I looked up and saw a police officer sitting directly across the street.
Yeah, you better watch your back. Straight up.
Officer, did you hear what the young man said to me?
No, I didn't, ma'am.
He threatened to blow up my house.
Do you wish to make a citizen's arrest?
Yes, I do.
You do wish to make a citizen's arrest?
I do wish to.
So we did. And he took him off, but he was back within a matter of minutes.
Over the next 18 months, the situation worsened. During certain hours of the day, the neighborhood streets resembled a rush hour traffic jam. In their off hours, the dealers used C.W.'s front curb as their personal parking lot.
You know whose car this is?
It's my car. You see me park it there, gonna act stupid.
I would like to have it moved.
Why don't you move my car? Let somebody else move their car.
Then in October of 1989, the confrontation suddenly erupted into violence.
He picked up a piece of wood, and I was infuriated. And I said to myself, this is stupid. So I started back across the street, and they started saying, yeah, go call the police. After getting to the police station, the boy was on his way back home before I even finished with the police report.
You guys are gonna pay for this.
In December of 1989, C.W. became involved in another confrontation. Chris Thomas, a new neighbor, was wounded when he came to her defense.
My own neighborhood.
They cut him very badly in the face. They had to take him to the hospital and get stitches. And someone called the police.
Police arrested the young man who had attacked Chris Thomas. For the next 10 days, things were quiet until New Year's Eve.
On New Year's Eve in East Palo Alto, for some strange reason, a lot of citizens like to shoot guns. They just shoot up in the air.
At midnight, Mrs. Roddy was sleeping when the gunfire awakened her.
I heard all of the shooting. And I looked up at the clock and I said, oh, they're just celebrating New Year's Eve, right? So I got up. And then I went in the living room. I noticed across the street 3 young men. They were just standing around talking, and there weren't any cars coming up and down the street at that particular time. I would say about 20 minutes after midnight, it had all quieted down. All of a sudden, I heard all these shots.
I hit the floor at that time. I was about to get up, and I heard my mother scream in pain.
C.W. Roddy had been shot in the stomach. Her son Darnell immediately called for help.
I think the attack on my house was a planned attack, and they were planning to kill us.
My mother's been shot.
The police arrived within minutes. As they fanned out to search the street, they found that C.W.'s new neighbor, Chris Thomas, and his wife had seen the attack.
We heard this big, loud rattle of gunfire outside our house. And I turned towards the window, and I could see the blue flames from the gun through the blinds. When I looked outside, I saw 2 young black men,
It was really scary because I could see bullet holes in the windows and the walls and the doors and through all over the garage. The car had bullet holes in it, and I thought that they'd killed her.
Investigators located shell casings from 3 weapons: a .38 revolver, a .380 semi-automatic pistol, and possibly an Uzi assault weapon. When the local police completed their own investigation, they called in the FBI.
We know that there were 3 to 4 individuals who were responsible for firing these rounds into the home of Mrs. Rowdy. This is a neighborhood that has been somewhat paralyzed because of the amount of violence that has been generated from those who took a stance to come forward and say no more.
Despite an extensive investigation, no concrete evidence has been unearthed. But even though C.W. Roddy's assailants have not been found, the attack has galvanized her neighborhood. A group of mothers have taken charge of the local park and attempted to move the drug dealers out of their neighborhood. They have had success in the park, but the women realize that this is only the first step.
I went by a couple of Saturdays ago and just observed the children out there playing, and it was such a beautiful sight, and it made me feel so good. It brought tears to my eyes. So it's looking better. It didn't all happen in one day, and I don't expect it all to change in one day, but I do see the beginning of a change, and the future looks bright, and I am hopeful.
Out of the near tragedy of Mrs. Rowdy's brush with death, the rebirth of her neighborhood has begun. A new drug task force has been formed, and for the time being, drug trafficking on her street has been curtailed. Still, the neighborhood wants C.W. Rowdy's attackers brought to justice. For every mystery, there is someone, somewhere, who knows the truth. Join me next week for another edition of Unsolved Mysteries.
Thank you.